it's important for everyone to support Jill standing up against that first and foremost, and standing up for independent politics wherever we stand on the issues, whether they're right or left. And so I'm so glad you're running right now. You entered the race, I think, before October 7th. And now your campaign has taken on more immediacy, or what Cory Booker or Obama would call the fierce urgency of now. Because the children all need a better future of tomorrow. Well, let's not use any of such platitudes like that. Let's stop beating around the bush. A war is taking place, a genocide in Gaza. You have the pledge to stop genocide in Gaza. You are politicizing this assault on a besieged, occupied people in a very daring and controversial way. Why are you doing this?
Very simply, as Gaza goes, we all go. Gaza is the laboratory right now for empire to run roughshod over human rights, over international law, over any promise of a decent future. And we allow this to happen at our own peril. Gaza is us. And, not only that what's happening in Gaza is a more extreme form, we know that. It's the worst assault on lives, on physical infrastructure, on the press, you name it. It's really setting records as an assault on humanity. But the principle is fairly commonplace, I'm sorry to say. If you look at the track record of the American empire after 9/11, in those wars, we've now chalked up something like 6 million deaths caused by these wars, essentially triggered by weapons of mass destruction that did not exist, and the sequela of that. So on so many levels, it's just really important that we fight this, and I think it's the fight of our lives here. And I'll just one other comment about that, which is that the flip side of the endless war machine is that it takes away from all of the life-affirming things that we need to do. Now, right now, the endless war machine is costing us, it's well over $1 trillion a year if you add up the many divisions, which is not just the Pentagon budget, it's also the energy budget, it's the budget for Veterans Affairs in order to take care of our wounded soldiers who put themselves on the line. So it's a huge amount of money, but it's over 50% of the congressional budget. So we are not funding children in poverty, whose numbers have skyrocketed. We are not funding, why are young people mired in debt? You have 44 million young and not so young people who are essentially locked in a life of student debt peonage. That doesn't need to be the case. We could bail out students, provide higher education for free as a human right. We should be providing health care. The richest nation in all of the world, in all of history, it's absolutely shameful that health care is not provided to everyone. From head to toe, from cradle to grave, that can all be done. And in fact, it doesn't cost us anything. It saves us money. A well-kept secret that Medicare for All expanded to cover mental health care and eyes and hearing aids and your glasses and everything. And from the moment of conception to the point of death, that actually would cost us less if we simply moved to a single-payer, one insurance type system, as in Medicare. So why fight on Gaza? Gaza is really the tip of the spear. It is the most, horrific nightmare being perpetrated right now, with over 25,000 people killed, many more left in the rubble, 70% of those women and children. The agonizing stories that we hear and see every day are incredible. I couldn't live with myself if I wasn't fighting this my every moment. It's just such an assault on our basic humanity. It's like there is no hope for humanity unless we fight this. So I thank everyone.
I mentioned your pledge to stop genocide in Gaza. Right now, a lot of people in New Hampshire have been planning to write in ceasefire as a way of registering their protest against Joe Biden. And Democratic Majority for Israel, which is an AIPAC front group inside the Democratic Party, they just pony up the money whenever anyone running for Congress says anything against Netanyahu, says Netanyahu would be wrong to wear a necklace of Palestinian children's ears, that they would run a primary candidate against them. We saw them do that to Nina Turner, and they ran this tool, what's her name, Chantel Brown. So they actually tried to prevent those votes from being registered, and they're going to be a force in the general election. So I think a lot of people are wondering how they can register their voice through their vote as a protest against Biden and Trump's ultra-Zionist, pro-genocide position, and where does this pledge to stop genocide in Gaza fit into that?
Great, and thank you for making that point, because there's nothing that the empire would like more than for the anti-genocide movement to disappear. Just abandon Biden. Just abandon Biden, go home, be quiet, shut yourself inside, close your eyes, and give up. And we say no. That's what this pledge is about. This is about standing up and being counted, about refusing to be silenced in order to allow genocide to move forward. This is it's a pledge. You can scan the QR code on the back, and maybe Kelly can come around and pass some of these out, but you can just sign up now to be counted. Currently there are, I think, 2,000 signers, but there should be 2 million signers. Any politician that fails to fight genocide, that fails to fight occupation, that fails to fight apartheid, it's about all of that, because genocide is the ultimate expression of that. We can't just stop the genocide and go back to everything that's been producing it. This is about standing up and being counted now. Don't wait until November to cast your vote. Stand up now and support candidates, only candidates, who have explicitly come out to fight against genocide and stop that. And encourage your networks, encourage everyone you know to stand up and be counted. I know this is, it's a scary, scary time. It's hard to do that. But if we don't do that, we're inviting this to not only continue in Gaza, but to continue in many areas of our lives. We should not allow ourselves to be intimidated by another McCarthyite type campaign, the suppression now and the harassment of young people in colleges who are simply standing up to express their ethical and enlightened opinion that we can have a world without genocide and it must be stopped. For them to be accused of anti-Semitism is outrageous. We shouldn't allow that kind of intimidation. And by signing this pledge, we show what the polls have already shown, right? 68%, according to one of the most recent polls. Another one showed 62%. But it is a very solid, near 2/3 majority who opposes genocide. So do not let them intimidate you into thinking that you're alone and you dare not speak up. It's really critical that we do that, and we need to turn their psychology around. And we do that simply by raising the veil, standing up and being counted, and standing together to ensure that we are going to defeat Joe Biden. We are going to defeat Donald Trump. We're entitled to do that, by the way. And there are 4 corporate candidates now, well-funded corporate candidates, who could all be splitting the imperial vote. You have Biden, you have Trump, you have RFK, and then you have no labels. So there are 4 of them that are all competing for the pro-genocide vote. And I wouldn't rule out that we could see the tables turn in a big way at this really critical moment in all of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's been astonishing for a lot of people to watch, aside from the, 30,000 killed in Gaza. We don't know how many are dead there. So many people are buried under the rubble. My friend, who many of you might know, Rifat Al-Arir, I believe he's and his family is still under the rubble. It's also, it's been astonishing to watch the way that this president has responded, not just to the humanitarian aspect of the genocide, but to the diplomatic aspect and the political aspect as well. You have Tony Blinken, he goes on his anti-diplomacy tour across the Middle East, then says, the real answer is a two-state solution. Obvious bullshit, just using that in place of a ceasefire. It's not gonna happen. But then Netanyahu comes out and basically openly denounces Blinken and the two-state solution and just cuts Joe Biden to his face. And what does Joe Biden do? He just authorized a major shipment of arms to Israel as a reward. F-35s, F-16s, new tank shells like the kinds that have been slaughtering families. You see images of Israeli soldiers just firing on homes in northern Gaza for fun with Israeli tanks. There's no Hamas doesn't have tanks. What do they need the tanks for? It's because they're planning a major regional war against Hezbollah, against Ansar Allah. And what are the American interests in that war? The American interest would be in getting the shipping lanes to come open, stabilizing Lebanon, getting Hezbollah to move north of the Litani, and then Tony Blinken would get a huge win getting the captives out of Gaza, wouldn't he? And then they bring them all to Washington for a ceremony on the White House lawn. All they need to do is do a ceasefire, and they can't do that. Why? Because you would all love that, wouldn't you? Yes, you would cheer. Most Democrats are for a ceasefire. 60% of Americans are for a ceasefire. But the Democratic Party is undemocratic because it's run by people like Haim Saban, billionaire Zionists who are the top donors, who've always funded Joe Biden's career and Tony Blinken's career, and that's who they answer to, and that's also who Donald Trump answers to. In 2015, remember, Donald Trump went to the Republican Jewish coalition and said, you guys are in real estate, you like to make deals. I want to make a deal with the Israelis and Palestinians. And they said, anti-Semite, he's saying Jews are all landlords. I guess he left out that there are a lot of NFL owners in the crowd too. But they called Trump an anti-Semite. Sheldon Adelson comes in, gives him a ton of money. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, comes in. And Trump does the Abraham Accords, the Golan settlement, everything. So we have two candidates that are basically the same on this issue because they're answering to the donor class and not to the working class. However, if you go talk to people in Tacoma Park, which is a very different community from the one I grew up in, there never would have been Ukrainian flags on people's homes when I grew up here. They declared Tacoma Park an anti-nuclear zone when I was a kid here. It was like an actual anti-war community, but it's been overrun with yuppies, no offense. Like people who work for the Beltway Bandits, they just like those old Victorian homes. Jamie Raskin is a complete sellout. Complete pro-war sellout. His father started the first anti-war think tank in Washington. Jamie Raskin wanted to climb up the ladder in Congress and become a Russiagate fanatic. Okay, I'm rambling, but the point is, those people are interested in other issues, and so what you saw with Biden's first major campaign speech was him pushing the abortion issue. Most Americans want abortion rights. And he's going to push that issue and try to drown out this issue. He was interrupted 13 times. So aside from this pledge, what can you do to force that issue, the issue of the Gaza genocide within the Democratic Party? And I guess I got to throw this in the question of you being the spoiler candidate. Is it really worth it taking this all the way to November if there are other important issues, economic issues, immigration, women's reproductive rights, and so on? If you put Trump, or you are accused of putting Trump in office, what's your response to that? Because I think that's the main question you're going to be getting down the line.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not just down the line; it's all the way. It was there, since the year 2000. I think that's sort of been the main pushback, and I want to draw attention to what's really the spoiler problem for the Democrats. And I want to point to the biggest spoiled election that they ever had. That was the midterms of 2010. What happened in 2010? Democrats lost 1,000 state rep seats. They lost 64 seats in Congress, the biggest hit ever. They lost 12 Senate seats. In Congress, they lost 13 governorships. Where was the third party to blame it on? Oops, there was no third party. What happened in 2010? It was the first election following the Wall Street bailouts. Remember our two Democratic houses of Congress and the Democratic White House. And what did they do? They bailed out Wall Street to the tune of trillions, and they threw millions of homeowners out of their home. That is fundamentally why the Democrats are losing their grip. That is what is spoiling elections for the Democrats. It's not third parties who actually stand up to fight on those issues where the American people are demanding answers and are demanding real solutions that we are providing. So I'd say it's really important not to listen to the propaganda that tells you to be powerless. It's very important to remember the problem for the Democrats is that they have abandoned working people, and they are servants to the war predators, to the war machine, and to Wall Street. That is the fundamental problem. And you can look at issue after issue where the Democrats either are not doing what they said they would, like they had a supermajority several times over the last several decades when they have been saying women's reproductive rights, that was the major issue. They never moved to codify Roe because it made a great fundraising issue time after time. And Obama and Biden both came to office saying it was their number one issue. But what did they do when they had the numbers to actually do something about it? They did nothing. So this is part of an elaborate spin campaign. People like Joe Manchin, who they like to blame things on, he has been purposefully defended by the Democratic Party. When he has had powerful, progressive challengers, they made sure that the challengers within the Democratic Party didn't have a leg to stand on, could not have access to their database. They reliably support and ensure that they cannot move forward on their progressive promises. And they have broken them one after one. On the climate, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act, which we've all heard about as this great climate solution. Well, in fact, the Inflation Reduction Act, little known fact, because it's just not much covered by the media, the Inflation Reduction Act requires before a single major project could be built for renewable energy using public lands or offshore waters and wind towers. Before that can be done, you first have to allow fossil fuels or nuclear to consume 2 million acres of public lands or 60 million acres of offshore waters. So it is actually a fossil fuels first bill. It is not a climate bill. So that's the kind of deception. Or you can look at these LNG, the liquid natural gas plants, which you may have heard of, because Joe Biden finally agreed to put one of some 17 or so that are in the works. He put one on hold. Well, if you add up all these LNG plants that were approved by the Biden administration, he's making himself out to be a hero because he's putting a pause on what he already approved. No, that's not a hero. That's a hypocrite, not a hero.
Look at what Tony Blinken said after they or the Ukrainians blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. He said, this is opening up a lot of opportunities for the LNG industry.
You're not kidding. And what they've done, at that moment when they blew up that pipeline, it essentially then meant, whoa, we have this huge market that we can replace with LNG, with liquid natural gas from the U.S. That meant 12 new LNG export facilities would be built here, which are incredibly destructive to offshore ecosystems. And it meant that there would be 12 new import facilities built. So this is just a boondoggle for that industry. But here's the bottom line. These plants, which were approved by the administration, by Biden's administration, I think it was FERC that did the approvals. But that amounts to, get this is from the Sierra Club, 440 new coal plants. It will kick us back to 2005. It reverses all progress made on fossil fuel emission reductions. Very little known fact, but you can read the Sierra Club's report on this. You can Google it, Public Health Impacts of LNG Plants. It clarifies 440 coal plants. So I would just make the point to reject this propaganda that tells you that you dare not stand up for what you want and what you deserve. We're supposed to be afraid of Trump as the worst possible evil. I think they're both evil. We need to forget the lesser evil and fight for the greater good.
Trying to figure this out. Let me ask you, just because you brought up coal-fired plants, LNG, you talked about Nord Stream. There's a political party that's actually at the center of this whole drama, and it's the German Green Party. They're in the coalition. They control the foreign ministry, and then you have the environmental minister, Robert Habeck, for the Green Party. And they're a huge party. Are they the most successful Green Party in the world, would you say?
To my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
If you call that success,
Yeah.
if being a neoliberal warmonger is success.
Yeah, and so Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister, is a huge neoliberal warmonger. She wanted war on Russia more than the U.S. administration did, and she did an event a few weeks ago with uniformed Israeli soldiers cheering on the assault on Gaza. So I wanted to ask you, what the hell is happening with the International Green Party? You also have Meretz in Israel. Their longtime leader has become a huge cheerleader. I think his name is Amir Golan, a huge cheerleader for genocide in Gaza. I mean, why aren't they kicked out of the Green Coalition internationally? And then what's happening domestically with the Green Party? I think a lot of people here might be interested in voting for you, but don't know if you're on the ballot or not. How many states are you in? How many states will you be on the ballot? And why does the Green Party? I'm sorry, I'm peppering with so many questions, but we gotta get through it. All Green Party questions. Why is the Green Party not seemingly growing in this country? What accounts for that?
So let's start with that one, because that's a really important issue. The Greens seem like they are the most hampered, dysfunctional, non-corporate party until you consider all the other non-corporate parties that have ever existed and have been wiped off the face of the political map. So you can remember even the Black Panther Party or the socialist parties that were thriving in the early 1900s, had members of Congress and mayors and all up and down all levels of the elected spectrum. Every non-corporate party has basically been wiped off the map, with the exception of the Greens. You can look at Peace and Freedom, and let's hear it for the Greens. Yes, we survived. Peace and Freedom Party was a thriving anti-war, non-corporate socialist party, but got beaten back to one state many years ago. So they're in one state. Or you can look at Socialist Alternative, which lives mainly in one city council, or maybe two. So, I just want to clarify that there is a very hostile, predatory political environment that regularly wipes out any challenge to empire and corporate politics. It comes with the territory. So it is a very difficult fight even to survive. But the Greens have managed to do that. And so I would encourage people, I did not become a member of any political party until I was the tender young age of 50, when as an advocate, I learned that we have to fight. And at the end of the day, it is a political fight. And if you're not ready to do the political fight, you might as well pack up and go home. Because power, as Frederick Douglass said, concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. Political parties, independent, small, third, non-corporate political parties is how we take that fight into the halls of power. And we absolutely have to do that. And I would encourage people, make your fight political and make the parties better. All parties have their struggles. They're very flawed animals across the board. The struggles that we have are not the struggles of being controlled by corporate profiteers and the war industry and health insurance companies. Those are the downsides of the Democrats and Republicans and all of the corporate entities, the so-called new labels, which is a fake pretend party that's basically just sponsored by billionaires, and they're pretending to be the middle ground, to bring us together across Democrats and Republicans. Let's have the middle corporate ground. So it's a tough fight, but I'd say become a part of a local, become a part of a party and help make it better, because it's only us that can improve it. One of the big problems of parties like the Greens is that we are very spread thin. We are systematically kept out of political dialogue, the nonprofit structures, the educational structures, you name it. The structures across the board, debates, we're locked out of debates. Now they're not even allowing debates, But there will be alternative debates. The Muslim community, for example, is hosting debates. There are other groups that will be hosting presidential debates. So we're beginning to build those institutions outside the Democratic and Republican parties. So I'd say make the Green Party better. Where we stand right now, one of the virtues of the Green Party is that we do have access to the ballot. You cannot fight, you cannot challenge empire unless you're on the ballot and actually making them sweat. They have to know that you are a threat or you just don't count at all. We currently have, I'm proud to say, and this is thanks to the state parties across the country, we have 75% of the work done. We have 75% of those signatures behind us. RFK is on the ballot in 2 states. We're on the ballot now in about 20 states with several, but we have the biggest states already behind us. That's why it's 20 states, but it's 75% of the work. So we actually got it done. He's saying he needs to raise $18 million to get on the ballot. We have to raise about $1 million because we have the most difficult and expensive states already behind us. So remember this, if there's one thing that you take away from tonight, it's this, that we're likely to have only one option that will be on the ballot as a national threat to empire and oligarchy. There will be one pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, climate emergency campaign that will be on the ballot across the country. And with your help, we will get there, and we'll get there soon.
Yeah, I don't know what is the point of no labels. I thought it was just like in case someone like Bernie ran away with the nomination just to come in and split the vote. I don't know what the point of that is.
Well, what they said, their line was that in case Trump got the nomination, they would provide basically like Republicans without Trump. I mean, it's nonsense, and they don't actually have a party. They just have some very big donors. They don't disclose their donations. For all we know, they're funded by a handful of billionaires.
Mike Bloomberg being one.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So we're Republicans without Trump. Sounds like the Democrats.
Exactly. That's how they're bringing them together.
They love Liz Cheney.
Well, I think she's a prime contender for the nomination. That and Joe Manchin.
I mean, when they started putting Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter, as his hero, I was
and by the way,
it's time to vote for Jill Stein.
Absolutely. Thank you. On the International Green Party, I just want to say that it's been a major topic of conversation within the U.S. Green Party to walk away from the global Greens, and that's still a debate. The reason we've stayed there is to try to influence other parties, and there are some other parties that are coming around now. There's some very, compatible Greens in Australia who are helping to lead the fight for Julian Assange and against the spread of nuclear weapons and nuclear submarines and so on. And in Canada, there's been major progress. There's a big war going on in the Green Party in Canada, but they now have a very strong contingent, which is very much like the U.S. Greens.
The leadership in Canada is no bueno.
Number one is horrible. Yes, number one is terrible. Elizabeth May, let's just be clear, who is a major neoliberal warmonger. Not so, though, for Dimitri Lascaris, who is number 2.
Yeah, Dimitri's the man. And if Dimitri does take charge there, that will be amazing for us as well. Yes. Not that I'm a member of the Green Party, but he's a force to be reckoned with. And I'm so glad we're rid of Howie Hawkins. That's me speaking personally, you don't have to say anything. But he was a supporter of war with Russia and Syria. And we just don't need that in alternative parties. We already have 2 parties that do that. Okay, but you're not the only independent candidate, you're a third-party candidate. You mentioned Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I don't know how I can even call him an independent candidate at this point, but he is sort of third party, or he's running on his own. We have Cornel West, who was running on the Green Party ticket. I don't know what happened there. Maybe you can address that. And then you have that cadre organization, what is it, PSL, that always runs somebody. What are your thoughts on all those three? Okay, yeah, write this down because I'm going to give you like 3 questions so we can get through this and get to your questions. What are your thoughts on the other third-party candidates? How many states will those other candidates be on the ballot in? So I see RFK is only on the ballot in Utah. I don't know how many states Cornel West will be competing in. 2. Okay, that's not very good. Okay, so and so assuming that they're not on anywhere near as many states as the Green Party, will you ask them to consolidate around you on the basis of stopping genocide in Gaza? Not RFK, but other 2.
So let me just say that I think left unity to fight empire and oligarchy is really important. Whatever party it's under, and it doesn't need to just be one party. I think we need to collaborate and we need to work and build together. Some of us have been working on that for many, many years. In 2012, after my first race, we began an organization called Left Elect that included most of the parties of the left. And it was Bernie Sanders who totally disrupted that, and many people were fooled by his run to think that, oh, we didn't need it, we could do it in the Democratic Party. Now there's an effort to get that started up again, which we will try to advance in the course of our campaign. And I am, and our campaign is in the process and already have reached out to PSL, the Party of Socialism and Labor, with whom we have cooperated on many rallies on the ground and mobilizations and anti-war efforts. We have an active, we have a very active relationship with them, and we are exploring how can we work together. For example, we will need a VP running mate, and it could be a person that's currently running, for example. We've already put out feelers to Cornell on this. I'm not sure that he's going to.
Has he responded?
Well, his initial response was kind of not interested, but things can change. Cornell has a very powerful and unique solo voice, and the reason he left the party, it's not easy to be in a party or in any organization. It's kind of easier to draw your own map and go your own way and not have to explain your positions to people. And if you're agreeing, you're going to have to explain your positions to a lot of people. There will be a lot of debate about everything, but that's the nature of democracy and grassroots organizations. People who are not used to that, it's not easy to get used to that in the middle of a presidential campaign and to be building relationships with people for the first time who are complete strangers to you. So I totally understand. I ran as a Green when I was tricked into running for office for the first time in the year 2000. And I completely ignored the party for like my first 3 races because I just couldn't figure out how to do it and how to work with people. It just takes a while to know an organization. So I wouldn't say, that it's a static, done deal. But right now, we don't see Cornell running to consider the VP slot. He's still trying to get on the ballot. We'll see if he can do that, but you have to be a real fundraiser, and it takes a team, and it takes people who've done this many times before. You don't get on the ballot your first time. You really have to learn it by doing it. It's not like it's written down somewhere, and you just follow the manual. It's very expensive, and it's challenging. So I think at the end of the day, probably RFK will get on the ballot because he's got oodles of money. I don't consider him a third party because he's got a lot of corporate connections. He's got a lot of connections to billionaires and oligarchs. And, to my mind, that's not what a third party is. And independent politics needs to be independent of Wall Street and independent of the warmongers and independent of corporate America.
He's getting public relations support from Elon Musk, who is just in Auschwitz with Genocide Shapiro, as I call him. Neocon child actor, and they were actually justifying genocide at Auschwitz. it was disgusting. This is a guy backing RFK. Bill Ackman's backing RFK, the guy who's trying to terminate all the Ivy League presidents because they won't ban Students for Justice in Palestine. I could go on and on. Cornel West's campaign to me feels like a book tour at this point. I don't know what the point of it is. He gave a great speech in Dearborn, but it wasn't a presidential stump speech. It was just, I don't know how this is going to work out if people present. It reminds me a little bit of the Democratic primary last time, where they took 13 candidates, only one or two, Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie, were different from the others, and it became this giant shell game. And then Obama, the hand behind the curtain, came in and offered different incentives to all the candidates to pull out. Like, Pete, we're going to give you a transportation secretary. Bernie, we're going to give you budget director into the Senate Budget Committee. They just try to bribe everybody. Bernie and then they just took everybody off the table, consolidated behind Genocide Joe, and Biden and Bernie was left completely exposed. I don't know how the shell game is going to be played with all of these independent candidates, but I don't see anyone but you as a serious threat to the duopoly. And so they ultimately are going to have to get serious about this issue of punishing the duopoly for their support for Israel and consolidate. That's my personal opinion. And I'm not even saying that. I'm not a Green Party member. I may not even agree with you on every issue, but I think this is such a central issue. This is a Holocaust. This is the Holocaust of our time. And so it is important.
And I really want to encourage people to seize the moment and to realize what a powerful moment that we're in right now, where 60-some% of the American public agrees there needs to be an immediate ceasefire and a negotiated solution. And YouGov did a poll that came out just yesterday, I think, showing that a full 1/3 of the American public now believes that Israel is conducting a genocide. This is huge for a third of the American public to agree on that.
Yeah.
So this is an emergency. They are not going to fix it. Only we can fix it. This is all about mobilizing the power that we have right now. And I really want to encourage people to join the email list, become a part of the campaign, volunteer for it, help to get on the ballot, help by spreading the message on social media. There is so much that we can do right now to actually seize the moment. Don't let their propaganda of powerlessness and hopelessness slow you down. Don't listen to it for a minute.
Yeah, there's fertile ground right now for the growth of a campaign like yours. And when Biden says democracy's on the ballot, we just have to laugh because everybody wants a ceasefire. His base wants a ceasefire, but they don't actually believe in democracy when it comes to foreign policy. Given that 1/3 of the American public,
Nor domestic policy.
but when it comes to foreign policy, it's completely off the table. Like a bunch of lanyards on K Street decide, and some Israel lobbyists in their McMansions that they paper with bulk bought editions of Alan Dershowitz' latest book. They insulate their homes with it. That's who decides. It's absurd, and I want to ask you about that on another issue because you tried to democratize the debate around peace with Russia. The other country that has the most nuclear weapons in the world. We're going to have peace. I remember when Mikhail Gorbachev came to DC, I think it was '88, and people lined the streets to celebrate the end of this traumatic Cold War that my parents' generation had lived through, having to go lie under, do drills under their desks. And many of those same people that lined the streets for Gorbachev, the baby boomer generation of liberals, became the biggest Russiagate fanatics once the Trump Russia propaganda came in, and you were collateral damage because we met actually at the 10th anniversary of RT in Moscow. You were there for all the right reasons, in my opinion, to do diplomacy, to meet Russian diplomats and politicians and talk about how we make peace. No one from Russia paid you a dime to be there. It was completely independently funded. The Steele dossier said that Russia paid you to be there. And then I believe you fell under a Senate investigation. And they basically tried to make you into a criminal for being in favor of peace. And, I was smeared for being there. I was in Finland on a Palestine speaking tour at the time, and I got an invite and said, hey, I'm going to go an hour away and see what's up. But Russiagate was about criminalizing diplomacy. So how do we bring this back, and how do we democratize foreign policy? How is your campaign going to give pro-peace people a voice?
I think, Gaza is the teachable moment here. Gaza is the consequence. It's sort of like the ultimate expression of militarism, of this kind of jingoistic foreign policy, which has the name full spectrum dominance, if that rings a bell to anybody. Full spectrum dominance is our declared policy at the Pentagon since like 1990, since the breakup of the Soviet Union, when we came out with an explicit policy saying that we, the USA, will dominate all regions of the globe, all potential theaters of conflict, whether it's the surface waters, whether it's underwater, whether it's in the skies, whether it's on land, in cyberspace. We will dominate all areas of the globe, and we will not tolerate any rising power. We will not tolerate even regional rising powers. And this is where it's taken us. According to the Congressional Research Service, we have sent our troops into 250 different incursions over the last 3 decades. We are spending trillions, basically over $1 trillion each year, 21 trillion since 9/11. We've had a whole series of 9/11 wars. We have lost all of them. We have not secured democracy or women's rights or human rights. We've basically created failed states, mass refugee migrations, and continuing terrorist threats. It's time to have a reckoning on what U.S. foreign policy is. It is a disaster, and it's time to stand up for an alternative, which is a foreign policy based on international law, diplomacy, and human rights. That's what I was there for in Moscow. I didn't only go to Moscow, I also went to Paris, where I talked with Jeremy Corbyn, where I spoke with the deputy representative on climate from China as part of the climate negotiations. And that was essentially my message throughout, as it was in the campaign, as continues to be the main Green Party message. Yes, there are occasional exceptions here and there, but they've really been moved to the utter fringe within the Green Party. It's very clear that what that message, what my message, what this campaign is about is, putting an end to crushing inequality, to endless war at the brink of nuclear, and to climate crisis. We need to fix all of those things, and part of that is talking with our adversaries as well as with our allies. As JFK said, we must not negotiate out of fear, but we must not fear to negotiate. And we have been proven absolutely right on all of those issues. Look at nuclear weapons. Right now we have one nuclear sub off the coast of Gaza. As far as we know, it is not nuclear armed. But you know what? The thing with nuclear subs is they could be anywhere. And there are 12 of them. I believe there are only 12. I know there are at least 12. And what do they carry? They carry the equivalent of 4,000 Hiroshima bombs. 4,000. What will that do? That is enough to drive us all into starvation from nuclear winter. So it doesn't make a darn difference that it's over there. It might as well be in your backyard because it's the end of all of us if those weapons be used. And we are now at a moment of expanding nuclear danger because all the constraints, we dismantled most of them, not all of them, but most of them were dismantled by us, the treaties that gave it a veneer of restraint. Now there are no restraints on it, really, hardly at all. And the little bit of hope that there was for various nuclear accords, those are being blown out the window right now. Israel is threatening to use nuclear weapons. Iran is being told that if you don't have nuclear weapons, you're powerless, basically. That's the lesson that they are being told. So we need to look full in the face what the consequences of empire and militarism are right now. This is not only impoverishing us, it also endangers every one of us. We need to stand up and fight it, and that means fighting for an approach to foreign policy that entails dialogue and discussion with our adversaries like Russia, like Iran, like China. We can solve these problems, but we've got to start by talking.
Okay, last question, do you condemn Hamas? I mean, do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah.
That's a joke. Okay, Q&A. I gotta go in like 15, 20 minutes, because I have my kid's birthday party, friend's birthday parties up the street, so I really have to go do parenting, but let's get like a few questions at once.
If you want, Max, you can continue the conversation, then we'll do the Q&A after you leave. If that works, okay?
Is there more? I think we should Jill address questions from the audience.
Sure, we'll start Q&A if we want to continue and get more questions. We can.
So we got Kathy, we got one here, and we got my man right here in the yellow and blue, Kathy.
Short preface, that we have to stand up with courage. There's a great woman named Dorothy Day, who in 1933 refused to pay her federal taxes because they're paying for everything we heard about tonight, the LNG plants and the nuclear bombs and the genocide. So I am appealing to we all courage tonight and call up or write to National War Tax Resistance Coordinating Committee and ask them how to expect to refuse to pay for genocide. If genocide is illegal, and it is, it must be illegal to pay for it. So what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think.
So let's get our two others at once, so we can get as many questions as possible. We're gonna take notes. Yeah. One by one? Okay, if you say so.
We'll take two, and then I'll do the vote.
Okay, you're the president.
Because of what we've been through with COVID and vaccines, and because you're running for president, many of us, probably most of us in this room, know somebody who's been injured from vaccines. Children are having swollen hearts called myocarditis. Many of them are dying in their teens on practice fields. We have there's a bill now considered in the Maryland legislature that children as young as 6 and older could get vaccines without their parents' consent. They could be taken by a babysitter to a pharmacist and get a vaccine without parental consent. So I'd like to know your stand on vaccines, COVID vaccine, but any vaccine.
Great, okay. All right, two really important questions. And we could do a whole night on the second one, so I'm only going to do part of that.
I would like to be a part of that too.
That would be great, all right? You're on. But yeah, I mean, to me, war tax resistance is a really critical part of the fight, and I very much encourage people to go to nationalwartaxresistant.org. Is that what it is?
Coordinating committee.
Coordinating committee. All right, very, it's critical. So definitely check into that. On COVID, I have a nuanced approach to COVID. As a healthcare provider, myself, and as a family of healthcare providers, I did have kind of a front row seat on the epidemic as it rolled out. And I myself took out maybe 6 weeks to just read the literature when it started, because I knew that my family was going to be on the front lines of getting vaccinated and also on the front lines of being exposed to really sick people full in the face. And so I looked at that literature until I was pretty convinced that for my family being very exposed, the risks of the disease far outweighed the risks of the vaccine. Now we're not in that place now, we're in a very different place. I would like to take out the time again to read the literature. The point I'm making here is that we are in a crisis of confidence right now, where people have lost faith in our regulatory institutions. And I think it's very hard for us to have an informed conversation when we are relying on parties who, some of them are coming through the revolving door, many of them are getting campaign contributions from big pharma, from medical device, from insurance companies. The medical world is full of big money and its influence. And it's no secret that our regulatory institutions have been seriously compromised, and the public no longer consents. According to the Declaration of Independence, all power, just power derives from consent of the governed, and the governed no longer consent. So I think it's very hard to have a rational discussion. I will say that I have friends, close friends on both sides of this issue, and we respect where each other is coming from, but we also have things to learn and to teach from each other. So I'm not going to give a blanket response right now, except to say that, to my mind, I never take a statement from our regulatory agencies at face value.
Well, wasn't the issue that it wasn't just a personal choice, it was mandated, many people lost their jobs, federal workers, there were vaccine passports, including at activist spaces like the People's Forum, that excluded like 40% of the city who are, for example, Black New Yorkers who didn't take it, or they were trying to mandate it for DC public school students who already had it, who are majority Black, would have shut down the schools. I mean, isn't that the issue, in that Fauci lied about what the vaccine could actually do? Isn't that why people lost confidence? So I think the question is, where do you stand on mandates of this particular one, not on other ones like polio? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, and I think
And we can answer it quickly.
So, as a rule, I do not support mandates, and the whole public health infrastructure, as a rule, did not support mandates. You can read the policies of the WHO, which before COVID did not support mandates. There are occasions where I think mandates need to be considered, but a lot depends on the particulars of the virus at that time, and it also depends on who's being exposed and what circumstances are you, are you talking about? Are you talking about schools? Are you talking, schools where kids don't have a choice? What exactly is under discussion? And I will say that so many of those rulings were heavy-handed, and that includes, I must say, the policy articulated by the Green Party, which was not properly ruled on from within. That was not duly considered by the National Committee, and it was issued by the steering committee. The steering committee, a small group, came up with that policy. It did not come through the National Committee. So I would say let's do a full-day conference on this, because it's a long and nuanced subject, but I believe there are not shortcuts. And let me say one other thing. When I was coming up through medical school, the prevailing opinion at that time was that you did not tell patients what was going on. And it was a dramatic development when the medical profession realized that people who were dying deserved to know what they were dying from and that they were dying. This used to be like a secret. This was something that the medical profession did not discuss with patients. So you see this carried over, and this is not to justify it or explain it, but you see this carried over in some of the medical institutions that are very paternalistic and patronizing and presume that they know what's best. I mean, that no longer holds water. That just doesn't stand. And I think we have to do a house cleaning on our regulatory institutions and the principles on which they function. But we have to start, I think, by empowering people and understanding that these are not decisions that get made by people on our regulatory boards who are subject to a lot of influence peddling, and that people are just supposed to accept them. There's one issue, though, that I do want to take a stand on, and that is the revelations about the origins of COVID. And there was new information that came out yesterday based on FOIAs around grant proposals. They actually were not funded, but they really have all the fingerprints of COVID on them. And I think there is a very powerful case now that COVID was produced in a laboratory. And I think one of the first things I would do as president, or that I should say that I will do as president, is to say that we will have a commission go forward as of day one to actually get the story.
Federal Investigative Commission.
Exactly.
And you're talking about Wuhan Institutes of Virology, which were either research, the gain of function research was funded by USAID through EcoHealth Alliance. So this is a US government funded project that was basically offshore because they couldn't get away with that at Fort Detrick because there's an activist.
And it was cheaper.
We got to go to questions. We had yellow and blue, and then back there. Let's get those two in. And before those questions, I have to go. Thank you all so much.
Let's give a big round of applause for Max. And a big thank you to Max. for the incredible investment of Stein.
Thank you all for the support, and I really hope we can do this again down the road. And I hope we can see you in Michigan where you're polling at 6%. So, let that up to the double digits.
Have a good birthday party. All right, so, yes.
First of all, sorry to see Max go. Two quick questions. One that just came from the discussion on COVID.
Yeah.
Isn't a lot of the skepticism a direct result of our for-profit healthcare system, which is
Absolutely.
these corporations make billions of dollars from a disease that they may have created that caused many millions of deaths? I think that answers itself, but
And even before we got to COVID, we have a predatory industry which places profit above people. So people come to this discussion, just very alarmed and alerted. So people are not in a trusting mood whatsoever, which is why the solution here is not only crafting proper policies and having public input on that, but it's also about getting the money out of politics and closing the revolving door to our regulatory institutions from industry.
the other question, real quick, is that for the Green Party to succeed, I believe, and I wanted to, build a multi-ethnic, multiracial coalition of poor, struggling, working, and middle class, not upper middle class, not bourgeois, not managerial class, but working class Americans. Can you do that if you promote ideas, social constructs like white supremacy, white privilege? Does that not alienate tens of millions, if not 100 million working class Americans who have seen their status steadily decline, their quality of life steadily decline in the past 50 years?
Great, so what I hear you saying is, does using terms like white supremacy lock people out, sort of poor white people or white middle class with declining status? I think the discussion has to be nuanced. Right here. Discussion needs to be nuanced, and it has to be, a multiracial, multi-ethnic discussion from the get-go. When Ajamu Baraka and I ran for president in 2016, we had just really good relations across the board, certainly with the communities of color. How to crack the nut with labor is, because we just saw, was it the UAW now that just came out and endorsed Biden? I'm sorry to say. Yeah, so, there are fractures out there in the community, and it requires a really nuanced community building approach to deal with. And thank you for raising the issue. The more of us involved in this process, the better. So I encourage you to sign up and take
I
part.
would just say Maryland Greens are very much interested in focusing on identity politics.
I see. Okay.
And I believe these terms from my question by Green are divisive and also inaccurate because so many poor whites, so many working class whites are again.
Absolutely, yes. I'm not a fan of identity politics myself. I mean, there's a point to be made because diversity is really important, but identity politics can be extremely divisive. I think class politics is kind of where the money is. Absolutely. All right, I think there was one more person who was already here. Okay.
I just wanted to maybe give you an opportunity to highlight that we have the action right now tonight. If you're a Maryland voter, put Jill on the ballot. Please see. Okay.
Great. All right, and then this young woman here, and then back there.
And then here in front.
Okay, and then here, and then David, my friend David over there, number 4. Okay, so
And that's probably the end of it.
yes, and then we'll just have some quiet conversation on our way out because the room will need to be vacated too long. Okay, number 1, yes.
So, forgive me, because I don't know much about the policies, but I was wondering what are your ideas for concrete policies towards the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Okay,
If
yes,
you
sure.
get elected in office?
Great, all right, so concrete policy towards Israel. We stop funding genocide, we stop funding Israel. I mean, a free lunch for war crimes, human rights abuse, genocide, and apartheid. No, It ends. It ends. And we need to use all pressure possible to insist that Israel come into alignment with international law. And international law says no to apartheid and occupation. So that's where it starts. We also remove all of our armaments, not one more penny, not one more bullet. All that stops. Israel has made itself a pariah nation, and the United Nations is very clear on where Israel stands and how it needs to come into alignment. And then we need to proceed with a diplomatic approach to find a way for people to live together. But that does not include ethnic cleansing and the current plan to just move Palestinians and Gazans out. Thank you. Yes.
Hey, Jill, thank you so much for running. I know that you're running because a lot of people urge you to please step up and run. And it just takes an enormous amount of moral courage to do what you're doing. All the labor that's involved, it's unbelievable. And speaking of moral courage, Ms. Kathy, thank you for raising what you did. I will confess I don't have the moral courage that it takes to be a tax resistor. I hope that one day I can, I want to be like you when I grow up. Because every year is the filthiest, most shameful checks that I will ever write when I pay my taxes, knowing that half or more go to fund crimes and genocide. But the best check that I can think of that I've ever written was that $250 check that I wrote to the Jill Stein campaign for president. I didn't come up with that number randomly. $250 happens to be the magic number when it comes to what's known as federal matching funds. Has anybody heard of matching funds? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? So if you don't, just want everyone to be aware that basically it's a program where if in each of 20 states you get at least like $5,000 raised from donors. They only count the first $250 that an individual donates. Once that happens for this campaign, it unlocks matching funds, which means that all of those donations get matched dollar for dollar. So I want to encourage everyone to donate that much or more if you have it. But Jill, my question for you is, can you talk about what that will mean for the campaign if and when matching funds gets achieved, and the difference between hitting matching funds sooner rather than later?
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is huge. Matching funds basically means that the national government, there was a time when they supported public funding of elections, and they created this system, and this is kind of the last that's left of it. And what it says is that they will match what they call small donations, $250 or under. They will match it dollar for dollar once we get to a certain threshold. And you don't have to worry about that threshold, but it basically means the more people that contribute, the sooner we'll hit that threshold, which will trigger right then, in the first round, at least $100,000, which is enough to buy us several more states worth of ballot access campaigns. So it just means that we'll get there much more quickly, which is really important, because right now the media, is pretending we don't exist. They're pretending that RFK is the be-all, end-all, but he's actually not on ballots. He's only on 2 ballots. Once we're on all of the ballots, it will be much harder for them to ignore us, and it just sorts the wheat from the chaff. We are not just a good idea. We are actually on the ballot. We are there to say to Empire, you're accountable to us. So I really want to encourage you to make a donation, whatever you can afford. If you can contribute up to $250, that will get us to that threshold much faster. We actually have a little map on our website, jillstein2024.com/matching funds. And you'll see the map of where we stand in each of the states in getting to those 20 states that have raised the money. But regardless of whatever state you're in, every contribution you make is going to help us get there and get there faster so that we can then focus on fighting this fight, not on just getting on the ballot. These ballot access battles is how they shut out competition. This is how they prevent us from being heard. And once we get that behind us, then we can actually go ahead and do this fight full bore. So thank you for bringing that up, and please give that consideration. So you'll be number 5. I think there was, let's see, was David next?
David.
All right, David, and then Asa, and then this young woman. Yes.
Okay, I feel, Max brought up the issue of the global Greens. I represent the Green Party in the Global Greens Climate Working Group. And I want to say, we didn't participate in COP 28. I didn't go there, but others did. And, uniformly, our group condemned Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. And the German Greens weren't even involved, by the way. So they're being marginalized in a lot of the Green parties in the world now. But let me get to a question. So, I'm going to support you. I live in D.C. I want you to get a maximum vote in D.C., and I support you every time you ran. You know that. You should get on the ballot in all 50 states if possible. And your message is absolutely invaluable. Okay, so here's my little dissent here. So I say in 2004, when, what's his name? Nader Rand announced for president as an independent. He announced, I'm going to open a second front against Bush. That's what he said. He didn't carry that out. Now, I submit that you should consider, as well as Cornel West, to open a second front against Trump, Republican, white supremacist, climate denial, neo-fascist party, while sharing your powerful critique of the neoliberal imperialist leadership of the Democratic Party. And I say that because we could get in a much better position after the election, because the Democratic Party has a lot of dissent on Gaza, on climate, virtually no dissent in the Republican Party, no dissent. They're all on board with what we're opposed to. So I submit, please consider this strategy, because we got to win a real Green New Deal as on your platform. So that's my little dissent. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I appreciate your expertise in watchdogging the Republicans. I spend most of my time watchdogging the Democrats because they're so deceptive, and you have to really dig deep to find where, yeah, Trump is a fascist threat, but I consider genocide the ultimate expression of fascism.
Exactly.
So I don't pay too much mind to the lesser evil spoiler stuff. I just don't. I spend a lot of time watchdogging the Democrats. But I love it when people are watchdogging the Republicans, and I want to get on a pipeline with you so you can just feed me that stuff. Because it's both of them. It's absolutely both of them. And we shouldn't be forced into feeling like we have to settle for one evil or another. They're both evil. We need the greater good. Okay. I think you had a question. And then we'll wrap after this, but we'll be able to talk among ourselves.
This man.
Sorry?
This man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Asa.
No historical context. Barack Obama actually was the one who set up a policy to shut down gain of function research. And he shut down Ali Fawcett, who was pushing it. And he said that he was anti-scientific. The Washington Post called him anti-scientific. And he said he was afraid that gain of function would try to increase the viability of the drug so it will kind of adapt. It's the perfect biological wall development of a virus. So he said this is too dangerous, and he shut it down. The first thing that Trump did, he said, I'm going to overturn anything that Obama did. In 1 year, after he shut down Obama's policy against gain of function research, virus broke out. So let's be clear about our history. The other thing is, the racist race to possess the goods
preceded any class struggle over development. I want you to understand the doctrine of discovery and social Darwinism trumps Adam Smith and corporatism in our politics. If you don't understand social Darwinism and you're around here talking about the corporate sector, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You better Google social Darwinism and understand how that trumps the corporate ideal, non-ideal. Now, how did we develop? And what is the greatest fear in politics in this country? It is development and movement toward a multiracial democracy. We went to a civil war because, I want you to understand, when Abraham Lincoln was on the ballot, do you realize that in Richmond, there was an article that said, Ohio carried by Negro vote? Now, what did they mean? They didn't say that. Ohio was carried because the white vote was split, and the black was not the majority, but their vote made the difference. And so they said to this, the whole nation, this Republican Party, by talking about the doctrine of multiracial democracy is a threat to our country. We went to civil war over the threat of a multiracial democracy, post-Civil War. The first presidential election, I want you to understand, in 1868, the majority of the white population in the North did not vote for Ulysses Grant, the general who won us the Civil War. You know why we have a 14th Amendment and we have a 15th Amendment to the Constitution? Because white abolitionists, who were a minority, when we had some serious white folks, they actually disfranchised most of the whites of the South. They enfranchised the former slaves. The majority of Southern registered voters who voted in the first presidential election were those who had formerly been enslaved. They had to disfranchise whites and enfranchise former slaves. We voted 3 years before there was the 15th Amendment. White populations of the conservative, they know this history. The reason why they don't want the 14th and 15th Amendment is because their ancestors did not vote for the 14th and 15th Amendment. You have a 14th, 15th Amendment because of the vote of enslaved. The majority of whites voted against the 14th and 15th Amendment. There was no bipartisan support for the 14th and 15th Amendment. It was passed on a partisan basis. Now, what the Greens should be talking about, we'll line this up. You should put pressure on these parties and say, look, if you're afraid of me as a third party, hell may fall. I'm willing to back up in certain states. If you would sign a pledge that in the future election, you will adopt ranked choice voting. And then you will put I'll see how serious you are. I'll back up. If you will pledge to me that you will put in a system that will show that no third party will be a threat in the future. And call their bluff and see if they're serious about that.
Awesome. It's I could listen to you all day. And ranked choice voting, we do need to really push that everywhere we can. And of note, the Democrats are pushing back against ranked choice voting and trying to prevent it. But what you said about gain of function research, back in the 80s, I think it was, there were all these bio-research labs that were being built, and one of them was being built in Boston. And at that time, we called them bioterror labs. That's what we called them. And that's what has turned out really to be the case here. They're just not called what they actually are. This isn't gain of function research is bioterror research. And that whole institution really has to be treated like, it's the equivalent of a nuclear weapon. And it just needs to be stopped across the board. So more on that to come. Thank you, Asa. And we have one last question here.
Hi, I just wanted to build on her question about Palestine. And, okay, let's say past member, January, we're in 2025 and your president, genocide has stopped. What next? What specific steps do you see yourself taking as president of, the U.S., like, the empire, to help rebuild Palestine and to work with Palestinian liberation? What's next?
Yes, okay, that's a great question. So there are many things that have to be done. Palestine has to be rebuilt. Palestine has to be secure. Palestinian rights need to be guaranteed. And we've got Israel here that's accustomed to thinking that it has to obliterate Palestine. So this is going to require a lot of work. Maybe it will require a UN presence of troops in order to keep the peace while Palestine is rebuilt. Palestine needs to be a fully powered state. It cannot be a client state without a military, without power of its own. So there are many questions that are going to have to be struggled with here. And I am not at that point yet where I'm thinking much beyond stopping genocide and dismantling apartheid, occupation, and ethnic cleansing. That is huge, but you're absolutely right, that's only the beginning. And how we begin then to construct a world where we ensure that human rights are respected and international law is obeyed. Because if that were the case, we wouldn't have a genocide going on. How many times has the UN voted to basically dismantle the apartheid state and the occupation? Over and over. And the US and Israel have always vetoed those resolutions. The UN needs to be restructured. We cannot be in the business of having the US call the shots. 5 powers call the shots and basically maintain the established order. We need to move from a unipolar world dominated by the US to a multipolar world where power and authority are shared in a small d democratic form. And that's not done now. The General Assembly comes closer, but the General Assembly is always overruled by the Security Council, where the US can basically call the shots. So longer discussion and very important and difficult issues, and we'll have some time here afterwards, so I'd love to talk more about it and hear your thoughts, because I myself have been on a big learning curve here. In the Green Party, we adopted a pro-BDS, single-state solution in 2012, but there's much more to it than that. We're getting to the point now where the rubber hits the road, and I would love to just start hearing some thoughts about that and the direction we should go. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. Big thank you for Amy, and Busboys and Poets. Thank you all so very much. And I look forward to talking. And let's win this. So thank you.